So this is going to be a guide for Aghanim's Labyrinth on how to beat it and tips and information that may help you along the way with this as well. So getting started, the very basics is that there's different paths you choose. You click on the statue. The statue is really important because overhead there will be a coin, a treasure chest, or a heart. The coin is by far the best one. It gives you gold, you can buy items faster, and it's way more worth. The hearts can work out to be okay sometimes, and the chest gives, like, I think neutral items at the end. Usually you end up seeing most of the runs that people doing, they're going like 90% of the rounds are choosing coin if it's available. Sometimes there's only a chest or else a heart. The hearts are actually kind of useless if you already have enough lives, because you max out at 3 lives that you're allowed to carry, and technically at that you have 4 lives, because the number of lives you have, say if it's x1, it means that you have 1 respawn left, so you technically have a 0 life as well. So think about that too. But the thing is that we care about coins, and the other thing we care about is red statues. Red statues are symbol for elite challenges. These give way bigger rewards, they give you more gold, and I think also a better upgrade at the end of the round. So the upgrades in general every round, you want to be picking what will make you strongest versus the bosses. The bosses come once at round 5, round 12, and round 18. So then you have the bottle, and the bottle will have a maximum of 4 charges. You get 1 charge per round. Ideally, coming up to the bosses on round 5, 12, and 18, you want to get as many charges as possible before reaching it. So try not waste it on the rounds prior to this, especially at the very early stages on round 1, round 2, round 3. Try and focus on not using the bottle and try and taking as little damage as possible. So now with the trap rounds, these are often quite easy on Apprentice because they don't do that much damage. When you go up to the higher levels of Aghanim's Labyrinth, they become much more difficult, where I think they even just one-shot you on level 4, which is pretty high. So you need a lot of patience and good timing. It doesn't really correlate with your skill in Dota, so it doesn't matter if you're hurled or immortal, it's just all about timing. Some strategies that you can use is to ping out on the ground where the pressure plates are. Another thing you can do is let one person go in front and be the leader. You can watch them and see them make mistakes, and once they make mistakes, you're less likely to make them. Now, when the leader gets to low health, you can then swap out who the leader is for someone else and wait for the next person to catch up to you. So we're going to look at economy and gold and how we should spend our gold. So one of the big things is that you do not spend money in the secret shop until the very end, just before Aghanim. It just doesn't make any sense. A lot of it is really expensive, and you don't want to rely on buying lives early on either. They're very expensive lives, and they're not really that well worked, because if your teammates win the round without you, even if they're just one person alive, everyone's just going to respawn at the end of the round, so it doesn't make any difference. So other stuff that people were doing as well was rushing Orchid. The first boss, however, is sometimes Omni-Knight, so it doesn't even work on him because he's magic immune. It doesn't make that much sense. Other things you can do with your items as well is pick up neutral items and have all of them in your backpack and swap them around, because once you're doing a room, you don't have access to those neutral items. So if you're 2 of them that are pretty strong that you want to swap between, those are often like a good idea. Later on, the neutral items, not as many of them will drop, so you're often just better off to kind of like scrap that idea. It's not really useful. Once you got like 1 good neutral item, that's really all you need. So the other items that you want just in general in your composition might be something like Vlad's or AC. The AC can be useful, but it's not essential. You also want someone who's building some sort of crowd control, like an Orchid. And other, like Bloodthorn is really good because it gives everyone critical damage. None of the heroes have evasion in this game mode, so ironically you don't need to build MKB just to get attacks onto enemies. One of the things I haven't seen enough people doing is building Rapier. Rapier is, like, in Dota, one of the most efficient items for damage. And ironically, in this game mode, nobody can pick up your rapier and steal it from you. So when you die, you just respawn at the same spot where you died. The rapiers drop in the ground, you can pick them up. You're even magic immune and like damage immune entirely when you respawn. So it's like a perfect item to pick up if you're really struggling for damage against Aghanim. So when it comes to heroes and which ones you should pick, it really doesn't matter. You can pick any heroes and really win. Ideally, what you want to have is you want to have someone who can tank, someone who has damage, is going to scale to later parts of the game, as well as someone who brings crowd control, so there's some sort of stun or disable to use on the enemy. Now, the other hero that's like everyone is pretty much talking about is Winter Wyvern. Is still one of the best heroes, and there's a good chance that they'll add more heroes in the future, which will likely make this game mode a lot easier as we go on. Ironically, the trailer showed Bristleback, yet Bristleback is not a playable character, which is kind of ironic. And there's this Reddit post from Flames that pretty much lists that within the game files of this game mode, you can end up seeing that there's a list of heroes that they may have been testing with that could possibly be added soon later in the next coming weeks, which is quite similar to what they did with the previous events as well. So now going on to the bosses, one of the first ones that people have a hard time with is the Omni Knight boss. I think they're called the Guardian Knights. They're magic immune, and you need to watch out for the axes which they throw. They aggro the axes onto the hero that is the furthest range away. So one of the strategies that you can use for this boss is that you can stand at the opposite sides of the room, or have the two bosses at the opposite side of the room, because the axes cannot reach the full way across, meaning that one person can tank one of the bosses and the other 3 players can focus down and kill one of the bosses. Now the disadvantage of this is that when there's only one boss left, the last boss will go into phase 2, and phase 2 will allow them to use this other spell which rains down circles of damage. And these circles are like really hard to get out of sometimes, and even good players can get caught off guard because the spawns are sometimes really like at a disadvantage unless you have really good movement speed. So that spell is annoying, but you just need to keep running and not standing in one spot. But it's not 100% foolproof. So ideally you want that phase 2 to be as short as possible. And if you can get both of the bosses down onto really low health before killing one of them, that way it'll mean that you'll only have to face the rings once or maybe twice if you time it like correctly where both of them are low health. So both strategies are perfectly valid, where you want to just focus both of them at the same time, or you want to split up one away from the other. So both strategies are perfectly valid. Just make sure that you do not skip Boots of Speed. It's going to make the Omni Knight boss a lot harder. Now the other boss which can spawn is Timbersaw, which is debatably easier, and it's pretty easy to kill him. He has less health, there's only one guy to focus. He spawns a bunch of units. If you've already got a lot of AoE spells, it's pretty easy to clear off all of these treants. You need to make sure that you clear them off and not just let them spawn everywhere, and then everyone gets like body blocked by the treants and gets hit by Timbersaw's ultimate. Pretty much like make sure you just clear those treants when they spawn, especially if you're the hero that has the AoE spells like Winter Wyvern. Now also stuff like Orchid is really effective against Timbersaw. He has pretty high armor for as well, like this early point, I think it's like 30 armor. He also has reactive armor as well, like the normal Timbersaw has, so you can build up stacks, I think up to a maximum of 20. So now going on to the level 12 bosses, the first one, which in my opinion is the easier one, which is Void Spirit. He jumps into the back line. He pretty much has the same similar aggro what you see with the Omni Knight boss, but ironically his spells are a lot easier to see where they're going to like appear or where he's going to jump to. There's usually like a spot on the ground before he jumps, and you see the other spells that like are pretty much the same as what are in Dota, because the Omni Knight boss, his spells don't look like normal Dota spells ironically, but in phase 2 he has a phase 2 like Omni Knight. He shoots Earth Spirit rocks everywhere around the map, and this is where you need to master the 5 Ds of Dodgeball: dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. If you master the 5 Ds, there's no way that this Void Spirit can touch you. So if your team are running low on health, you can go into the edges of the map and find health potions. This is very similar to a lot of the other boss fights. If you're low health and you can't go in close to the boss, make sure you're going off and picking up these health potions. It'll heal your allies or if you're a hero that just straight up doesn't do that much damage. Some of the other stuff that I actually forgot to mention as well is that Witch Doctor's Maledict is really good against a lot of these bosses as well. So now going on to Storegga, which is the tiny boss. And this guy, I don't even know what to say about him. He's like absolute bonkers. He kills you in 1 to 2 shots, massive nuke damage. He just aggroes the most random hero. You can't even stand near any of your allies because he aggroes after my teammate and then he hits you. It's like 550 movement speed. He has like pretty high armor. He doesn't have any magic resist, so Witch Doctor's Maledict is like really good against it. And that's really like, you just have to hope for the best, and like your teammates just die. Like every match I've seen of this, he always kills at least like 1 or 2 people. And there's no way that you can get around it. And his animations are so bad, and the 3D model is like so big, you can't even see what animation he's doing because he doesn't even fit fully into the camera. So it's like the worst boss design I think I've seen in this game mode. So you just have to maybe get enough lives before you go into this. Maybe on round 10 or 11, go and do one of the health rounds so that you can get more lives drops. Or even just buy a life just before you go into Tiny, because the secret shop is available at that time. So now going on to the most important part. How do we beat Aghanim, and what do we need just before we go into, and what do we buy? We need good movement speed and mobility, we need high maximum health, we need damage, we need potions, and we also need, most importantly, good dodging skills. Now to go into each one of these, with mobility, some heroes like Magnus can skewer away. And why skewer is important is because we need to get away from the laser beam. The freaking laser beam is what kills everyone. We need movement speed, which can sometimes be got through neutral items near the end, or we can choose to pick up something like Boots of Travel level 2, which is really efficient way. Sometimes just treads on their own is often not enough to get you enough movement speed. You also may want to pick up something like a Force Staff. So for high maximum health, you can pick up Heart of Tarask. You can also focus on upgrades as well after the end of each room to give you more maximum health. Now damage is a pretty easy one. Again, there's no evasion against Aghanim. And with potions comes into a more interesting part where we have the Dragon Potion. I think you can get 1 or 2 of them before the end. These are really important, and you want to pop these off straight after the cutscene of Aghanim and fighting him. Don't pop it too early, and this is a limited time that pretty much just makes you stronger in every shape and form. And you're just way better, and you do more damage, you're harder to kill. And the other potion that we want to care about is the Purification Potion. It's pretty much like a mini cheese. It'll bring your health and mana up by like 1,000. You can also, if you have any gold left over, buy books such as the Intelligence, Strength and Agility. These are not very efficient ways, but if you have like 500 gold left over, or some gold that you don't know what to spend on, that's often a good way to like invest an extra bit of gold. You may even be able to give them to your teammates. I haven't tried that, but it might be possible. And even if there's only strength books left over, you can still consume them and they give you more health. So ideally, it doesn't really even matter if you're that hero or not that requires an int book or a strength book. So now when it comes to fighting Aghanim himself, we want to look at some abilities that are either killing people a lot or that people don't understand that well. So ability lock is one of the ones not many people understand. And the reason why is because what it does is that it steals one of your abilities and imprisons it in an orb that floats around him. If you kill those orbs, one of those abilities will be returned. It'll either be your ability or your teammate's ability that he had previously stolen. Now, ability lock will also be reset when you die. So if you die, all of your abilities will be returned. Now, he can steal every single ability that you have. So ironically, it's kind of luck and fingers crossed he doesn't steal the important spells. But really what you just need is damage to right click him most of the time. And if you have high health, it makes it harder for you to die. Now, when it comes to mobility, this is where it comes down to the laser beam, as I was explaining earlier. And you should also just focus on saving your Force Staff or whatever saving ability that you have during that time. Now, when you want to start attacking him and putting out all the damage you can is when he uses the spell that looks like Pugna's Life Drain, which is Pugna's ultimate. He also can time walk. When he time walks to the other side of the room or to another position, this can often be a good time to go over and focus some of the crates, which is where you can get health potions and similar stuff that you've been doing on the previous bosses. You reiterate again on this Aghanim fight. So now when it comes to damage types, should we focus mostly on magical? Should we do physical? I think both of them are perfectly valid. If anything, the physical is more preferred and a little bit easier. So what happens is that his magic resist is 0%, his physical resist is much higher. He has 65 armor, and typically the way the armor works at the moment in Dota is that if you have over, I think it's like 35, I think over 40 armor is pretty much the same, and you're kind of like capping out at that point. So you need to reduce his armor by more than 25 for armor reduction to be like starting to be effective. So you need AC, Desolator, Solar Crest to really make it a lot easier to do physical damage through him. You can't just get one and think, AC is going to be enough. Just build a Blightstone, it'll do the job. You need to reduce it by a good bit to really make an impact, because the difference between 40 armor and 65 is almost like the exact same thing, I think, from like graphs that I've seen in the past. So now when it comes to fragments and spending these fragments through the tree and upgrading it. So ironically, you would think that going all intelligence, if you play an intelligence hero, would be a good idea. But it makes a lot of sense to get just 1 point in each, at least at the very start, because these first level of branches are actually really strong. But then, ironically, if you want to get like stronger, make it easier to beat the bosses, it's often just better to get some of these early strength ones. And then after that, it doesn't really matter what you do, because a lot of these upgrades are like kind of useless. You look at this one called Absolutely Yoked, and you only get +4 strength. Like, that's so useless. Like, these things are going to make like such minute little differences. It won't be the difference between you beating the boss or losing it to the boss. Now, when it comes on to battle points, you ideally want to just play the easiest level possible, Apprentice. If you've already beaten it, you will farm battle points faster, and you get, I think it's like double the amount of points for beating it. So it pretty much works out a much better way, and you want to get as far as through the like bosses as possible, or each room as much as you can. So ideally just focus on winning, and the better you get at it, you can teach other players on how to play. And if you're someone who hasn't beaten Aghanim yet, as the weeks go on, it's going to get easier and easier and easier, as people will be there farming battle points and constantly winning more regularly. And there's already like something like 60 days left, so 2 full months for you to be able to beat this. So hopefully this video was somewhat helpful. Might end up even beating Aghanim. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe, and for like more Dota content, I guess, like this.